Yo, what's up? What's good? You are now tuned in to the Keys and Seeds podcast, where we discuss music, mental health, and spirituality from the perspective of Ken the artist, as well as Ken the person behind the art. And of course, if you support the pod, then you too are also Ken. Be sure to join the conversation and follow the pod at Keys X Seeds Pod. And as always, knowledge and kindness is key. This is episode 1, the introduction. And without further ado, let's jump into the episode. All right, now that the formal introduction is out the way, welcome everyone to my podcast, my new creative endeavor, and my baby. Everything that I create and put out into the world is like my child, because I put a lot of thought and intention and like my heart and my soul into that shit. You feel me? And I'm an artist, so I'm sensitive about my shit. So with that being said, I'm very much excited to start this podcast. It's something that I've literally have always wanted to do, but at the same time, I'm nervous because I'm finally taking a vision and a thought and an idea that's been in my head and taking it from an idea to... Y'all get what I'm trying to say. I can't find the words right now, but it's like it's happening, and it's an overwhelming feeling. It's a great feeling because, like I said, this is something that I've always wanted to do, but it's also very nerve-wracking because this is out of my comfort zone, and I don't know what to expect from crossing new territory, you know? But cheers to facing our fears, new beginnings, being more in alignment with my true and authentic self, doing things that I genuinely want to do and I'm passionate about, and yeah, cheers to the first episode. Cheers to me facing my fears. And yeah, all that good shit. I'm about to take a shot. Hopefully I don't spill this because I'm messy as fuck. Whew. I'm not a drinker. I'm not a drinker, and I'm technically not a smoker either. I'm a social drinker and smoker. I do both socially. Like on my own, I don't really care for drinking alcohol, and I really don't go out of my way to buy weed. I actually don't even know how to roll up. Fun fact. I have my own little bowl though. But yeah, like I drink and I smoke socially. So yeah, but this was to take the edge off and, you know, to celebrate new beginnings and facing our fears. But yeah, so what I'm excited about, first of all, let me wash that down with some water. And this is not a paid advertisement, by the way, but I mean, for this to be a tequila, it did kind of go down smooth. But yeah, so like I said, I'm very excited, but also very nervous because I'm facing my fears of being myself, like 100%, like authentically. I already share a lot within my music. If you know me, you know that I do music. If you don't know me, if you're new here, I am a music artist, and you guys are going to learn a whole lot about me through this new journey that I'm on, being a podcaster. But yeah, so this first episode is going to be a introduction episode to the podcast itself. I'm going to be letting you guys know where this vision came from, you know, how I got here, with wanting to start this podcast, and what you guys can expect from the podcast. And of course, through me explaining that, you guys are going to learn a little bit about me. But just to give you guys like a little nugget, shining light on things ahead, episode 2 is going to be a part 2 to this episode, where I will be giving you guys an introduction to who I am as a person, as in the person behind this podcast, you know? But like I said, of course, as I, continue to release episodes as the podcast goes on, you guys are going to naturally learn more about me. But yeah, this episode is an introduction to the podcast itself, how I got here, how I came up with this vision and this idea, why I'm finally starting it now, what you guys can expect from the podcast. And then episode 2 will be a part 2 to this episode, where you guys will learn, a little bit more about me, kind of like a crash course, Spark Notes type episode. You feel me? But yeah, so without further ado, this podcast is something that I've always wanted to do before, and I say this without even including my ego within it, right? Podcasting is something that I've always wanted to do before I even knew what the word podcast was. Like, literally in high school with the blog, knowing that I wanted to share my thoughts with people in a unfiltered kind of way, right? And I feel like podcasting has become this thing as of recently, where it's like a trend now for everybody and their mom to have a podcast. And I don't see nothing wrong with it. I feel like every industry and every, field of work is arguably oversaturated. But at the end of the day, if God called you to be in that particular industry, God is going to make room for you. Because although it might be a lot of people doing the same thing, technically, like, industries aren't really oversaturated. If you know that that's what you're really passionate about doing, and you know that that's what God called you to do. But if we facing the reality of shit, I do feel like a lot of people just wake up one day and just be like, oh, I'm about to rap. Oh, I'm about to start a podcast. It ain't shit wrong with it, because, you feel me? It ain't got shit to do with me. But just for you guys to understand where I'm coming from with this podcast, those that kind of know me, even if you haven't been there, like, from the beginning of my journey, you can kind of tell, like, okay, her starting a podcast is not really far-fetched. If you really know me, like, you know that this isn't far-fetched at all. But if you don't know me at all, or you're someone that's, listening to this or watching this, and you're like, where the fuck she come from with this? Like, I have plenty of people that will attest that a podcast is something that I've always wanted to do. But it was something that I never really, looked into doing or, took serious because of fear. I don't know. I just never really had the confidence, for real. But I feel like the good thing about podcasting being, this trend now, like everyone is into listening to podcasts and everyone, is starting a podcast. I felt like it was time now for me to be like, okay, it's time for me to, you feel me, go ahead and slide up in here too. You feel me? Because like I said, if you truly are passionate about something and you know that God has called you to do something, although a particular industry or field of work might be oversaturated, it's room for you. If you know that that's what God is really pushing you to do, and that's what you really want to do. And going back to what I was saying as far as me being excited yet nervous to do this, I was excited to do this podcast because, like I said, this is something that I've always wanted to do, but I'm nervous. And because I was nervous, and I've been nervous and I'm still nervous, I was like hesitant. I'm like, do I really want to start this podcast? Like, yeah, I get my thoughts off and shit on Twitter. Like I share who I am through my music. Like, is it really necessary for me to start a podcast? But what's crazy is like the relationship that I have with myself and with God now is so crazy to where like I knew that this podcast is something that God wanted me to do, because although I'm very excited and passionate about this, there was still this part of me where I'm like, nah, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it because I'm nervous. That's out my comfort zone. That's new territory. I don't know, what's going to come of me starting a podcast. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what it is about me being nervous. I know what it is. I'm not going to say I don't know what it is. Like, it's weird because I do music, like I'm already in front of people and on the mic, right? But with music, it's like, yeah, I'm vulnerable within my music and I'm able to express who I am within my music. But with podcasting, which is the reason why I actually wanted to get into podcasting, it's really just like straight to the point, in your face, right? And that's why I've always wanted to start a podcast. Like, I've always been a very opinionated person. I've always been the type of person who wanted to share their thoughts with the world. I know that I'm still young and I still have life to live, but I've always been the type of person who have always wanted to share their story and the knowledge that they've gained from their life experiences with others. And I've always just wanted to get on a mic and share who I am as a person without feeling as if it had to be super structured in a way where I'm creating a song, Because although I'm very passionate about music and, poetry and, just art in general, and this too is a form of art, how can I say this? I don't want to say like it's a ceiling, but it's still like a way in which you still have to like structure shit and put yourself in a box, if that makes sense. Like with music, like I still got to make sure I find the right flows and pockets and the right beat, and you feel me? Like music and poetry and just like expressing myself through art, the way I've been, is totally different from me just getting on a mic in front of a camera and just speaking, right? Like, it's totally different. And I've always just craved that medium, that space of just expressing who I am without feeling like I gotta find the right beat or I gotta make this shit rhyme. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's only so much that you can do or put into music. You feel me? It's like, I'm gonna always be creating songs. You feel me? But like podcasting and blogging, like, it's just a totally different medium. It's a totally different form of expression. And it's a form of expression that's more stripped back and allows you more freedom to really like get your shit off. And that's the reason why I've always wanted to start a podcast. But at the same time, I'm nervous because, you feel me? Like, everything is stripped back and it's just me and my thoughts. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a very open person. I don't mind being vulnerable, but I know that the vision that I have for this podcast is going to require a version of myself that is more vulnerable and more open than I would like to be, if that makes sense. So the nervousness and the fear is also coming from knowing that I'm going to be very vulnerable and open within this podcast. And I already feel like I'm an open book. I already enjoy sharing my story and my experiences and my thoughts on shit. But I know that this podcast itself is really going to just like get me out of my comfort zone and have me share more of myself in a way in which it's going to be kind of uncomfortable. But I'm excited and I am ready for God to use me in a way where God gets the glory. And saying that is just crazy to me because I grew up in church and, you know, I kind of already always had a relationship with God, but I feel like as I'm getting older and I'm being more intentional about healing and growing and getting to know myself and becoming a more authentic version of myself, naturally, I'm growing closer to God and my relationship with God is improving in a way where like me and God, we like this. And it feels good. Like it's so comforting knowing I'm in alignment as much as I am. And I have to credit God and I have to credit myself for doing the work. And to know what it feels like to not have a relationship with God and to not have a relationship with self and to feel as if you aren't in alignment. And that shit is scary as hell because you feel like you just like, I don't know, like throwing darts at the board. Like living a life outside of God. And I know everybody has, you know, their own beliefs or whatever and their own, you know, definitions of God. Me personally, I refer to myself as spiritual versus religious. We're all created in the image of God. So I believe that I'm not the God, but I do believe that I am a God. I do believe that I possess power within me from God that allows me to be a co-creator of my own reality, you know. But yeah, like to know what it feels like to be outside of alignment and to not know yourself and not knowing like where life is headed and feeling as if you don't have a purpose, to knowing like, I don't want to say I know exactly who I am, but I have more of an idea of who I am and I'm comfortable with all of who I am, my shadow, everything. Like it's nothing that anybody could try and like shame me for or put in my face. It's like, although there are still parts of myself that I'm uncomfortable with, I fuck with myself heavy and I fuck with God heavy. And I just need to say God is good. But yeah, I'm sitting here talking and ranting and realizing that I didn't even fucking introduce myself. For those who do not know me, my real name is Kennedy and my artist name is Kendall. And you guys are going to learn more about me in part 2 in the next episode. Give me 1 second. The screen over here that's like tracking the audio just went blank. And I'm like, I'm assuming it just went sleep and it's still recording. But we still in action. Also, side note, before I continue talking about myself, I do have to shout out the Brother Guys podcast. I am using their space, their setup, Ratchet Studios. Another shout out. Ratchet Studios is the home of both of our podcasts. And I'm very appreciative of the resources that I have available to me to make this podcast happen. I'm very appreciative of the community that I have and the village that I have. And yeah, like, I'm big on community. I'm big on, just having relationships with other people. And you guys will definitely learn more about that and why I stand on that. But yeah, like, you can't get to anywhere by yourself. Like, somebody is gonna have to help you. You feel me? Like, first and foremost, like I said, I don't know what everybody's belief is, but as for me personally, I know that I'm nothing without God, and I know that I cannot do anything without God. And because this podcast is about music, mental health, and spirituality, if you aren't comfortable about me discussing God, let me just say that disclaimer. I'm all over the place, y'all. I'm sorry. This is episode 1. It's going to be more structured from here. But if you're here, if you're tuning in, I appreciate you. God is going to bless you. But yeah, so disclaimer, because this podcast is going to be discussing music, mental health, and spirituality. Music and mental health, I feel like I don't really need to put a disclaimer on that. But spirituality. Notice I said spirituality and not religion. I believe that everything that we have around us are tools that we can use either for good or for bad, right? And my faith is very important to me. So with that being said, if you are not comfortable with hearing someone discuss God, scripture, but also with that, if you aren't comfortable with listening to someone approach things from a more, how can I say this? My belief in God and my faith is not confined to the structures of religion, right? And although I believe in God and I read the Bible and I meditate on scriptures and I follow the word, I also meditate. And I know a lot of people think meditating is demonic. I also am into tarot. I know a lot of people think that that's demonic. I'm also into angel numbers, astrology. Everyone has their own opinion, right? But for me personally, the relationship that I have with God is more so about me knowing that I have a relationship with self. And I don't worship anything as far as, tarot cards or crystals or anything like that in a way in which it's an idol in my life, but I use everything around me as tools. And I know who I am because of the relationship that I have with God and because of what the word says, aka the Bible, right? But if you read the Bible, and I'm not going to get too preachy, but if you read the Bible, you will know and you will understand that, in my personal opinion, the whole point is to gain a better understanding of who you are and to use the tools that you have around you for either good or bad to help you on this spiritual journey, right? And a lot of things that people say are demonic, it's like, y'all must not be reading the Bible. Like, we must not all be reading the same Bible. You feel me? But also, too, like, I personally am not the type of person who is about to judge anybody for what the fuck they got going on. If that's how you want to worship God, if that's the relationship that you have with God and yourself, cool. Who am I to judge that? You feel me? And I have always been the type of person who questioned everything. Like, literally was the kid growing up in church, like, why can't I question God? You feel me? Like, I've always questioned everything. I've always been curious. Like, I've never been one to be like, oh, no, I don't understand that. So, yeah, nah, I'm not fucking with it. You feel me? Like, I really feel like everything here is for us to take what resonates and leave the rest as we see fit. You feel me? So, if you don't agree with the way in which I talk about God and spirituality, this podcast might not be for you, baby. But yeah, I'm also not apologizing for who I am. I'm not apologizing for the way in which I show up on this podcast. I'm not apologizing for anything that comes out of my mouth unless, you know, like I really just missed the mark and wasn't aware of it. But yeah, before starting every episode, I pray. I prayed before I started this episode, or before starting every episode, I'm going to pray because obviously this is the first episode. I've only prayed once. But yeah, like I definitely prayed before starting this episode, and you know, I pray that God, you know, is a mouthpiece and, you know, moves through me and speaks through me, you know, bless me more, God. And I refer to God like gender interchangeably. Sometimes I say he, sometimes I say she. God is genderless. God is a spirit, you know. I'm a woman. Sometimes it feels more comfortable referring to God as a woman. Other times it feels more comfortable for me to refer to God as a man. But yeah, you feel me? Like, I don't, you know, get too deep into that. The relationship that I have with God is more so about the relationship that I have with self, and knowing that I have a purpose that is bigger than myself. And just seeing how God has moved in my life and the life of other people, I'm all about just taking what resonates and leaving the rest, you know? But yeah, so again, I know I'm kind of all over the place, and I'm going to try to not make this episode too long. As we get deeper into content for this podcast and like we actually like get into like the meat of things, like I imagine these episodes being kind of long, but I'm like, this is only the intro episode. I really don't want it to be too long, and I really don't want to be all over the place, but I like to rant unintentionally. So yeah. But yeah, so if you do not know me, my real name is Kennedy. My artist name is Kendall. And like I said, you will learn a little bit more about me specifically in the next episode, which will be a part 2 to this intro episode. This episode itself is really just an introduction to this podcast. But of course, because I'm the person talking on this mic, you're going to learn a little bit about me through this episode, as I'm sure you probably already have, just from me talking for the past 30 minutes. But yeah, so like I said, this podcast is something that I've always wanted to do. As a kid, I've always been very opinionated, always been a writer, always been a free thinker. Literally, like, as a kid, you would never not see me with a pen and a notebook that I was always writing in. Like, words and writing and expressing my thoughts has always been, like, who I am. Like, it's always been a huge part of who I am, right? So, as a kid, I also grew up in church. And growing up at church, I also sang in the choir. And I don't want to get too far off track because, like I said, you guys are going to learn more about who I am and my journey up until this point in the next episode. But long story short, growing up as a kid, it went from me like journaling and like writing in a diary to me writing music, to me writing poetry, to me starting a blog, to me circling back to the music and finding more confidence and getting better at writing music, to me writing something that I was really proud of, that was a song, and putting it out. And from there, I was like, okay, boom, music is what I'm passionate about. I'm about to take this and I'm about to run with it. So if you've been following my journey up until this point, majority of people know me as a music artist. Majority of people who follow my journey know me as a rapper and a singer. But if you've been following my journey before the music, you know that before the music, obviously, music and rapping specifically goes hand in hand with poetry. Before the music, I was a poet, did like poetry competitions and shit. And before poetry, I had a blog where I would blog my, I don't know, like controversial opinions, I guess. Like, I've always been very outspoken and a free thinker, and I feel like a lot of thoughts that I have are really not even like unpopular opinions, but like shit that a lot of people is afraid to say, if that makes sense. Or like, just naturally, I'm a deep thinker and I think about shit on a deeper level, and people be like, it was never that deep. But I'm like, it is that deep. You feel me? Like, all this shit is spiritual. And that's why I say that I approach things from a more spiritual standpoint than the structures of religion, right? Like, I don't know. But when I had this blog, while I was getting my thoughts off about, like, you know, hot topics, trending topics, you know, get my unpopular opinions off, I guess. That, like I said, I really didn't even think they was really unpopular. I don't think I really have unpopular opinions. I just speak my mind. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people are afraid to do. And that's sad. I want people, I like a goal that I have for this podcast, for real, not only for me to get comfortable in my own voice, and that's another reason why I was afraid to start this podcast, because although I do get my thoughts off, I know that I don't really stand in my voice. I know that I don't really stand in my power, as in the power of my voice, as much as I should. And I'm facing my fears and getting out of my comfort zone of me stepping more into that power of using my voice, right? But also too, like, I don't like being perceived because there's always that possibility of people perceiving me in a negative way. Like, I know that I can get on the mic and express myself authentically, and because I'm being my most authentic self, there's gonna be people out there that resonate with that. Like, okay, I might not agree with everything you saying, but I can respect that you real. You feel me? And there might be some people who like, yes, like I resonate with everything you saying. You know what I'm saying? Whole time, it's also people out there who are like, nah, I ain't fucking with it. And I just feel like in general, a lot of people like to misinterpret what you say. And I'm learning how to become more comfortable with being misunderstood, because you can say something very fucking clear and direct, and the motherfucker will take that, twist that, and be like, well, this is what I think you meant by it. Like, huh? You feel me? Like, that's not what the fuck I meant by it. But you feel me? It's like, it's that gamble of like, through me, you know, charting new territory of me starting this podcast, I know that I'm gonna find more people that resonate more with me, you know, in my path, in my journey. But I know it's also gonna be people who are like, nah, I ain't fucking with it. You know what I'm saying? And that's cool. I don't do this shit for y'all. First and foremost, I'm doing this shit for myself because it's something that I've always wanted to do, and it's something that I'm gonna be passionate about. But I'm also doing this because I'm being obedient to God. I know that this is a vision that God has given me, and I haven't been able to like escape and like sleep on. Like, the vision for this podcast is something that like God kept like tapping me on the shoulder about, like, all right. And like what's so crazy too is like I'm like looking around me, like watching this person start a podcast, watching this person that I know and that's close to me start a podcast, like just going back to the brother guys, like knowing people in my close circle, like my community, my village, like seeing other people in the field of work that I'm doing. It's like God is telling me like the resources right here. You feel me? Like, you see everybody else around you doing it. Like, I gave you the vision so you can also, you feel me, put your stamp on it and change this industry in the way in which only you can. You feel me? Like, I know God had been like nudging me, and I'm like, all right, you feel me? Like, I don't know how I'm going to be perceived. I don't know what's going to come out of me starting this podcast. Like, I know that, you know, I'm going to be uncomfortable. That's why I was hesitant, but I'm like, fuck it. I can't live my life in fear. And like I said, as I continue to grow more into the most authentic version of myself, and I'm continuing to, you know, grow closer to God, it's like, you gotta be obedient. You feel me? Because like I said, I'd rather be in alignment and be obedient than to be out of alignment and feel far from God. And I'd be sick if I know God gave me the vision for something and I'm like, nah, I ain't gonna do it. Or I keep putting it off to the point where now I'm not able to do it. And now I'm seeing that idea and that vision was passed on to somebody else. You feel me? Like, I wouldn't be able to live with that. So we here now. But yeah, so yeah, when I had that blog, while I was like getting off my thoughts about, you know, like controversial shit, like I would always like drop my 2 cents on shit that was going on like in the news, like trending topics. But I would also too like drop my thoughts about like my family and like relationships that I've had in my life. And I know I'm going to upset a lot of people with the shit that I say on here. But like I said, I don't give a fuck. Respectfully, you feel me? Like, of course, I'm going to still try and be respectful of, you know, the words that come out of my mouth. But I just know that when I start to get into certain topics, it's going to be certain people that's going to be upset that I'm speaking on it. But this podcast is about healing and it's about growing. And God has been pushing me to share my story and my testimony. And with that being said, if you're someone who has been a part of my story in some way, shape, or form, if you know that you don't like the role in which you played in my story, that ain't got shit to do with me, because at the end of the day, I'm here to speak my truth. Just had to say that. But because what made me say that is when I had my blog and I was getting my thoughts off on like trending topics and things that was like going on in the news and shit, I also still was doing like healing type of work and like expressing like how I felt within, you know, the structures of, you know, just my family and like just like my inner world. And I remember like folks was trying to gaslight me and be like, why would you put them in a negative light like that? And and it's like, writing has always been my safe space, my space to really get my thoughts off about how I'm truly feeling, not just about the outer world, but about my inner world. And that's what made me say, as I continue to share more of who I am and I share my story and my testimony and everything like that, if you know you played a role in my story that you don't really like, that ain't got shit to do with me. I'm sorry. Maybe you should have been a better person. Stink. Yeah, I'm not here to coddle nobody's feelings. I'm here to speak my truth and express to you guys, well, share with you guys the knowledge and the wisdom that I've gained through my life experiences so far. But yeah, also with that blog too, because I've always had just an interest in music, I was also interviewing artists and creatives. So like my blog kind of was like all over the place, but it's so crazy because I feel like with me starting this podcast, like everything is coming back around full circle. And that's why I'm focusing so much on this blog. Like I had this blog where I literally would just get my thoughts off about everything that I was passionate about or I had a strong opinion about. And I eventually got to the point where I'm like, I'm tired of typing and like proofreading and like doing all this extra shit. Like I really wish that I could just like get on a mic and just like talk about this shit. But like at the same time, it felt safer and it felt comfortable being behind a computer screen and just typing up some words and just letting that shit go. You know, like it's totally different when you're on a mic because you have to be mindful of what you're saying in real time. Not only that, but I knew that with this podcast, I also wanted a visual aspect. And I'm like, in all honesty, even though I do music and, you know, I've been on stage performing and I've been, you know, in front of a camera doing music videos, and hell, like even been on TV. Like you can get on Netflix right now and see me on that bitch. You feel me? And that's something that I'm going to get into eventually too with this pod. I'm going to get into a lot. But in all honesty, like I don't truly feel comfortable like in front of a camera on a mic. It's like in my head, I'm like, yeah, like that seems super cool. But like even still to this day, recording music, like it's nerve-wracking as fuck. Like expressing myself in a way in which is authentic to me. And it's nerve-wracking not only like, I don't know, like recording and like the act of everything. Like it's nerve-wracking, like doing things as far as like the actual like process of creating is nerve-wracking sometimes. But it's even more nerve-wracking when like I'm like sharing it out into the world now, you know, because it's like from there, it's like it's out of my hands. You feel me? Like I already recorded the song, I already mixed it, I already, you know, did what I, you know, did. Now it's like It's for everyone else to perceive it however they choose to, you know? And like I said, this podcast is going to be about growth and healing. So just me being intentional about doing shadow work and being as self-aware as I am. I know like the nerves or like, I guess like the fear of like expressing who I am and sharing parts of who I am comes from being shamed for being who I am and expressing who I am as a kid. And because of that, that's what made me like retreat and be kind of like in hermit mode. Like, okay, like writing is my safe space then. You know what I'm saying? Like if I can't speak up without, being shut down or being judged for, who I am or what I got to say, like I'm going to just put it in my journal, like I'm going to just blog about it. You know what I'm saying? Like I know that that's where that comes from, but like I said, I'm learning how to be my most authentic version of myself, the most authentic version of myself. I'm learning how to face my fears and just show up as myself. You see me, you hear me, the fuck, but nah. So yeah, with that said, this first episode was kind of all over the place, but I'm going to try and wrap it up with a little bit more structure. So yeah, with that said, this podcast is going to be about music, mental health, and spirituality. I already have shared with you guys that I'm a music artist myself. So on a music tip, I'm going to be sharing with you guys like my thoughts and opinions when it comes to, new music. I'm going to be sharing my music takes with you guys. Like music itself is something that I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of music first. So music will definitely be a topic on the podcast. But also, as a music artist, a lot of the episodes are going to be kind of like a rap genius type of vibe. I don't know, for lack of better words. Like, I plan to have episodes where I do a deeper dive into my music. Like, I'm going to take each song, each project, and explain to you guys exactly where I was when I made that project, when I made that song. And on the mental health and like spirituality tip, I'm going to be exploring like the themes within my music and how it relates to the bigger picture of shit. You know what I'm saying? So like, for example, if I have a song where I know in that moment I was like depressed, like I know like that's going to lead into another conversation of the importance of mental health and, you know what I'm saying, like battling depression. Like I struggled with depression, but where I'm at now, like I can genuinely say like depression is not a spirit that's heavy on my life anymore, and I'm so grateful for that. But yeah, so these episodes are going to be deeper dives into my music takes, me discussing different topics within mental health, topics that, relate to, relationships, just all things healing and growing from a spiritual aspect is what I'm going to be talking about on this podcast. And I mean, that's pretty much all I can say about that. I really just pray that you guys are just here for the journey and just continue to follow the pod and the content that I will be releasing with this podcast. But yeah, like I don't know what more to say other than that. Like we're going to be discussing music and mental health from the perspective of me being the spiritual free thinker, artist / creative that I am, right? But yeah, also too, what you guys can expect from this podcast is not just me talking, but me also having guests. I already have a list of guests in mind. I, of course, want to have artists that I work with on the podcast. So any artist that I've ever featured on a song, any artist that has ever featured me on a song, anyone that I've ever worked with in any type of creative capacity, producers, graphic artists, like just any creative that I've worked with in any way, I would love to have on a podcast to, pick y'all brain and have y'all share y'all creative, process and y'all mind and thoughts, with my audience, with my platform, as I do a deeper dive into all of my music. Of course, the artists that I have a part of my music, I would want them to also be here to share their perspective. I also want to have just artists and individuals whose brands align with mine on the pod as well. Artists that I'm inspired by, people who are doing work that I really fuck with and am inspired by. And hopefully we can get like some other, mental health advocates on here, preferably like some professionals, because I'm not a professional. But yeah, like I'm just excited to pick the brains of other people. I'm super big on having conversations with people. Like I said, I'm super big on community, and I love being able to have those type of conversations with people where like I'm walking away from the conversation with my cup filled, and I know that I was able to pour into someone else's cup because we just see each other. You know what I'm saying? Like I love those type of conversations. I love being able to pick the brain of other people and having other people genuinely interested in my brain and who I am on a deeper level, beyond the surface. But yeah, I also plan to I'm looking at my notes if y'all see me looking at my computer. On socials, I'm gonna definitely share script shares and morning motivation throughout the week. I'm gonna eventually start up a Patreon to share additional content on and to have more of a community with people who are really, serious about having a community of people who are committed to working on themselves. I do want to start a book club. I read. That's something that I've always been into. Like reading and writing always went hand in hand for me. As an adult, I don't read as much now as I probably should, but I'm trying to get back into it. So I think me having a book club would be great as far as just holding myself accountable and expressing to y'all or sharing with y'all what I'm gaining from the books that I'm reading. Because the thing about reading, although I don't read as much as I probably should, reading do excite me, and I'll be like, ooh, I want to share what the fuck I'm reading. You feel me? So that's definitely going to be, a topic or content on the pod, me talking about, what I'm reading and what I'm gaining from what I'm reading. And yeah, so to hold myself accountable, I want to start a book club, but I also, again, want to have a community, with other people that like to read. You feel me? And I don't know, the nerd in me just always wanted to have a book club. So yeah, we're going to be reading self-help, self-improvement type of books, books related to anything music and mental health and spirituality. Of course, I would want to read books that are by music artists. So for example, I haven't read Rick Ross' book, haven't read Gucci book. So reads like that, I want to have reads that are preferably by Black authors, of course. What else did I write or note? Yeah, the book club is probably going to be on Patreon too. I don't know when I'm going to start that. Obviously, all of this is still fresh. All of this is still new. But also too, because the word of the day is community. because like I really am passionate about community and community service, I do want to start hosting my own events that are more so like give back type of events, you know, like back to school drives and, you know, like when it's Christmas time, going around to the homeless and, you know, passing out gloves and shit like that. You feel me? Like Thanksgiving, passing out meals. Like I want to start being able to do shit like that. Like I have so much in my mind that I know I want to do as far as like healing and helping my community. And it's been nerve-wracking because I'm like, you know, dealing with imposter syndrome. I'm like, I don't know. Like, do I really have, you know, knowledge that I could share or offer with people? Like, I'm still healing myself. You know what I'm saying? But like, that's the beauty. Like, this podcast is really just going to be me healing out loud, me showing up as my most authentic self, and discussing what I'm passionate about, which is music and mental health and my faith. But yeah, man. Also, I'm not no therapist or, you know, mental health professional or nothing like that. But I do want to be able to like pray for people and be that person that people feel as if they can come to whenever they do need advice. Mind you, I'm not perfect. I'm not saying I got my life together. But something that I've been working on is not giving unsolicited advice to people. But like at the same time, people be asking me for my advice on shit. So I'm like, that's something that I know I definitely want to do. Like I want to be able to help people in any way that I can. Honestly, just bottom line. But yeah. I feel like I'm missing something. I just realized that I have on this WCRD shirt. And this honestly was just a shirt that I threw on today. Like I knew that I was going to start like recording for the podcast today. But like I wasn't intentional about putting this shirt on. But I'm like, damn, that's crazy. Like I have on my radio shirt from college. And that just made me think about how I didn't mention to you guys how, yes, I had a blog, but also too, like going into college, and like I said, you guys are gonna learn more about me in part 2, and I'm definitely about to wrap this episode up right after I get this point off. But yeah, so most people know me for my music, right? But before getting into music, I had a blog. And because I've always been into writing, I've always been into music as well, I went into college thinking that I wanted to be a music journalist. And that ended up changing. I'm going to explain why in part 2. But that went from me wanting to go from that went from I went from wanting to be a music journalist to, okay, maybe I want to do radio. Like maybe I want to do, you know, broadcasting, like be a radio personality where I'm able to like interview other artists and shit, you know? And I have a degree in telecommunications, which is like a umbrella of, you know, radio, journalism, you know, shit like that. And my concentration is audio production. And I ended up reaching that conclusion as far as like, okay, boom, this is what I'm about to graduate with. Because while in college, I realized music was what I was passionate about at the time. And I'm like, okay, if I'm about to do music, then I might as well make it make sense if I'm also still about to be in college. And I probably need to learn audio production. And needless to say, I'm not using my degree right now. And I kind of been feeling guilty about it, but at the same time, I know that God does everything for a reason. And God kind of just allowed me to realize that everything serves a purpose, and everything might not work out in the way I would want them to, but everything is working out for my greater good. And with that said, although, I went from working at a radio station and I have a degree in TCOM, and, I had a blog, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that. This podcast now is just the next stepping stone that I know God is telling me to take. And what's so crazy is the fact that I feel like everything is coming back around full circle. And I can't help but think about how when I was doing radio, I didn't really have the confidence to be, the personality that I saw myself as in my head. And I still feel as if I don't have the confidence. I'm fighting imposter syndrome like a motherfucker right now. But, God kind of just made me realize okay, yeah, you got this degree. Yeah, you was, doing this or, working here. But I really want you to step out on faith and create your own platform. You don't got to ask for a seat at anybody else's table. Create your own table. Build your own table. Put your own seat up. And pull up seats for the people that you will want at that table. And word of the episode is community. I'm super big on being able to share my platform with others, and knowing that this platform or any platform that I have is not just for myself, but to be able to help others. And yeah, I feel like this first episode was kind of all over the place, even while I had notes. But I prayed that God, would be a mouthpiece and flow through me however God wanted to flow through me. And I feel like God did just that. And with that being said, cheers to episode 1. Cheers to facing my fears and getting out of my comfort zone. And yeah, I'm super grateful for everyone who has tuned in and is following this journey. The Virgo in me was overthinking all of this shit. All of it, even this whole setup. But I know as time goes on and I get more comfortable and I find my groove, we gonna get this shit together. You feel me? But yeah, I have so much more that I want to talk about, but part 2. Again, super grateful for you guys. Grateful to God for giving me this vision and giving me the courage to finally step out on faith to pursue it. And yeah, I forgot to mention, and this is my last point, I'm off. My goal is to do weekly episodes. Weekly episodes. And my goal is to drop them on Sundays. Sundays are kind of the rest, but clean up around the house. You feel me? Sundays for me are my days of grounding and returning back to self. And knowing the vision that I have for this podcast, I feel like it would only make sense for me to drop the episodes on Sundays. And although there will be both a video and an audio, aspect to the pod, I really want to be able to provide content that you guys can consume in a way in which if you driving, if you cleaning, if you doing this, if you doing that, you can still tune the fuck in. You feel me? But yeah, so my goal is to do weekly episodes dropping on Sundays. Again, music, mental health, and spirituality is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be reading books. We're going to be healing. We're going to be growing. We're going to be motivated. We're going to be growing closer to God, if that's what you went to. And we're going to be giving back to our community. And yeah, we're going to be becoming the most authentic versions of ourselves. And that's all I got. Bow. I'm out.